Shalom Akim. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakakadash. Double honors to the elder apostles of Great Millstone who teach a rule well, and Shalom to the sincere Akim, spreading this truth in sincerity. Shalom. So in this video, I want to, actually delve into a dream of, which, when I look at the dream, it actually has like a connection to my current situation, concerning, my re-education to become a riding and driving instructor. So, this dream, actually signifies that, yes, we might have been, given a certain thought or intent, like something that we want to accomplish ourselves, and the way that we are going to get there, might not always be the way that the Heavenly Father has intended, you to reach that destination, or for you to, basically complete that which you want to complete, right? And that actually goes into Proverbs chapter 16. It says, verse 9, a man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directed his steps. So, we might have something in our mind that we want to do or that we want to accomplish, but the way towards that is actually, what the Heavenly Father, sets out for us, right? And, the reason that the Heavenly Father does it is because the Heavenly Father is omnipotent, right? He's all knowing, he's all powerful. So he also knows that, yeah, you might have certain thing in your mind through which you want to do it, but that might not be the best way for you to accomplish it, right? It might not be the best way for you to, get there where you want to, or that there where you need to be, right? So the Heavenly Father, he might put the mind or the idea within your mind, of something that he wants you to do, or that he wants you to become, or something that he, has intended for you. But he, along the line, he is going to basically, mark the path, or he's gonna allow you to walk the path, along the way, you know, by hindering, access to your initial path that you wanted to walk, right? It's kind of vague, but, I also, will, um, speak a little bit about my own situation, because, like I said, I'm busy with, re-educating myself to become a riding and driving instructor, both for the car and for the motorcycle. And I intended on doing, my practical things, with the riding and driving school that I got my motorcycle lesson with, right? And I'm in the phase, like I said, where I do have to, do the practical things, take some riding lessons again, or driving lessons again, because I need to have an exam in about a month to still show that I'm capable of performing all those, tasks myself, if I want to, make other people, also, perform it, right? Because I have to teach them how to do it. And, the owner of the company, I kept asking him, like, okay, so, when do you have time? When do you have time? And it was really, like, yeah, next week, and it's this and this amount of money. And, because I asked him what it's going to cost, and when he has time. But then it turned out that all of a sudden, he had no time to respond at all to pick a certain date, right? So that was like, okay, so I don't know what this is about, or how this is going to unfold. But, if I'm not gonna take any action myself, I'm gonna be in some trouble, man. So through some people that I know, I got in contact, with another driving and riding instructor, that I met through them. Was like, are you also, allowed to, educate, people that are becoming a riding and driving instructor? And he verified, yeah, I also took that course on top of, my education. So I decided to, basically, do those lessons with him, right? Um, but I intended to do it with the riding and driving school that I'm basically affiliated with myself, right? But then, I don't know how, what the Heavenly Father has in store for me in the future, right, concerning that. But for now, this is the route that I have to take. So without any further ado, I want to, speak on the dream, because it really is like, okay, so I had certain plans that I intended on doing, but, there were some other, things that happened along the way. So the dream, and I wrote it down, it says, I was traveling on a bus, I wanted to get off at a stop close to my home, because right now they're also busy with, redoing, the whole public transport system over here, like a metro type of thing that is, instead of underground, is on top of the ground. So there's no access, of the tram or the metro close to my house, which, that's just something that the Heavenly Father, put in the dream, because that, is something that's going on also right now in my current day of life. I would have to take the bus. I would have to, basically get off a little bit further, or use the bus. It says, I was still busy with unfastening my belongings from the seat in front of me, and that was like the driver's seat, right? Because I had to get out. Want to get out, but I had some stuff that I, basically hung up, during the trip, during the ride. Thank you. And I already managed to take off some of my things and put them outside, but I wasn't done yet. So I got out, and then, the door closed. But I put my foot in between the door for it to open, because, usually then it opens up again. It's a safety precaution. So the bus door closed, and the first time, I managed to stop the door with my leg, but then the driver forced the door shut while I was still inside, and my belongings were still left outside, right? My belongings were still left outside. And when I look at that dream, my belongings, or the things that I was busy with to carry, it's like, the things that I need to, do and carry with me, or that I need to do in order for me to finish my education, you know, because there's like a whole thing, right? I had three theoretical exams that I had to pass, which those three I passed all of them first time. Kahala Ya Bashmi Asha, put in my prayers, to pass those tests, because the Heavenly Father already showed me in the past that He, helped me, finish my educations, every time, so I put the prayers up for that, but there's still some things that I need to be doing. There's still some things that I need to be doing, which that is the practical thing. The practical thing is the exam to show that I'm still capable of driving myself, and then the next one is going to be like internship, coupled with a final exam, which they are going to judge, or basically, yeah, judge whether I'm able to, provide, people with a lesson, you know. So there's still some things, that I needed to do, which, when I look at a dream, those are the things that I still need to take outside, or that I need to, you know, get out of the bus. It says the bus then drove away, and I initially thought, that we was going to stop at the next stop, which that's not that far away, right? The next stop is not that far away, especially not over here in Holland. You have bus stops that, are pretty close by. Like maybe 150 or 200 meters. You know, but I ended up way farther than I expected, man. And I was, started to get a little bit anxious because I was afraid someone would, take my belongings. And also I started to, get a little bit of anxiety, like, man, how am I going to finish the course, finish my education, when this, initial plan of mine that I had with, the riding school and driving school is basically blocked, man, because that's the feeling that I'm having, that it's going to be blocked. Also the dude said that he was soon going to, be on a holiday or vacation. That could be, also the case. But for now, I'm in the dark because he hasn't responded to me concerning the situation. And it says, yeah, then I became anxious because I was afraid someone would take my belongings. And I then tried to figure out where I was and how to get back, to my belongings, man. Because I got out of the bus, or I was only able to get out of the bus like far away, man. Like I didn't know where I was. You know, that was kind of a messed up situation because I had to go on my phone, and be like, where am I at? Where's the nearest bus station? Or the bus stop where I need to hop on to get back. It says the dream ended while I was still searching and trying to find my way back. You know, and I already gave some information concerning the situation, but I also wrote some other things down. Um, so one of the things that I wrote down as well is like that something outside of my control changed the route or changed the situation, right? So it says the owner of the driving school, he stopped communicating with me um, for the practice, the training, to perform all the tasks as a rider and basically, yeah. I'm always get those two mixed up, man, because a rider is for a motorcycle and a driver is for a car. But the driving lessons again, because after I'm about to have my license for about 10 years right now, and all those things. After a while, you're gonna loosen up on the things that you have learned, during your, you know, getting your license phase. So I need to get back on how to do it properly according to how the exam institute, you know, requires us to learn, but also to teach. You know. Um, so yeah, it also says. So then I had to find, another person, through someone that I knew, like I said, the other riding and driving instructor. Um, so the similarities between the dream, and my situation is like I had a destination in mind. The way that I was going to get there, I had that already planned out in my mind. But the Most High actually, something that was outside of my control, He changed it up a little bit, right? He changed it up. And that's where it also goes into that a man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directed his steps. The Heavenly Father eventually decides, which doors open and which doors are gonna close. And that can sometimes, like be a little bit frustrating, but that's also where the faith, and trust in the Heavenly Father Yahweh Shem Yahushai actually comes to pass, man. So through these type of things, the Heavenly Father is also, going to, you know, um, build you up, build up your faith, you know. And it's actually kind of funny because I also, prayed to the Heavenly Father, like, please, give me some dreams, again, to help me grow, to help me develop, you know, to know what's up, and then that same night he gave me this dream because I was a little bit struggling with my situation. And also, when I'm now, busy with the instructor, which, yeah, he's an Edomite, but I believe this man is even a Temanite amongst the Edomites, because this man is a very intelligent person. He knows a lot about, the things that need to be done, and he's delving a little bit, back into the things that he needs to uh, 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 have me work on, to basically pass, man. So actually, to be quite fair, you know, I'm actually, happy that this man right now is helping me and guiding me through the process. This man, he's making jokes, like the type of jokes that I learned that I would also have to make, as a instructor, like, brushing things off, not, putting too much emphasis on it. So I'm seeing these type of things, coming back, in that whole thing. I'd be like, man, that's actually dope. I don't really have any experience concerning, the other owner, because he would help me as well, like directly. But I know that he's an Amalekite, and I've heard that he's a very strict type of dude, man. And I don't know what I would prefer, during this period in which I'm trying to, get all these things in my mind. Like, okay, so I need to do this, that, and the third bit. Then I don't need no guy blasting in my ears, with a certain tone in his voice. No, then I need someone that has like certain patience with me, that sees, okay, these are the mistakes. You can do this and this better, and let's practice again. And you know, because I'm already a little bit stressed concerning the whole re-education, man. Because it's a lot, actually, man. It's actually quite a lot that I have to do. You know. But yeah, um, I digress a little bit. But yeah, then again, the Heavenly Father gave me this dream as well. Like, are you gonna trust me, even though I'm gonna reroute you? And that's where the faith comes in, man. Have faith that the Heavenly Father, you know, does not intend, situation like this for evil, but for good, man. Because I do not know the outcome. You know, it says, what I wrote down. It says you end up somewhere different from where you intended, and then I have to find a new way forward. And that is actually what took place, man. Now I'm in a situation where I did not want it to end up in. Like, okay, so now I don't have nobody to guide me and prepare me for my exam. You know, and also in the dream, I didn't give up. I started looking immediately for a solution. And this dude actually came up because a couple of weeks prior, this man already said, man, so hit me up if you need any help with your education. So I was like, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do if things do not turn out correctly, with the school, man. So the Heavenly Father already set certain things up in emotion, like weeks back, right? And then if you remember that, you'd be like, oh, so only thing I have to do is observe, what is happening in my surroundings, pay attention, and then, being able to adapt, and adjust to the situation accordingly, man. You know. So, um, also, like one of the points is like the route or the destination that I have intended, you know, doesn't necessarily have to change. What changed in my situation is the route, you know, and that's something that we just have to be okay with, man. We have to be okay with the Heavenly Father Alba Shemir Shai, changing certain routes, you know, because He's eventually going to bring us to the destination, man, to the desired destination. Might even be better than we intended, man. You know, because I had one particular route in mind, to become an instructor, but that has now been blocked off, man. And that created a certain uncertainty, within me, and like anxiety about losing the things, that I basically was busy with in the dream. It was my own belongings, but that doesn't mean anything in the end, man. You know. So yeah, yeah. there's not much more than I can add onto the dream, but you know, Proverbs 16:9 is beautiful, man. It says, "A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directed his steps." So we, like I said, man, you know, a changed route doesn't necessarily mean a changed destination, because you're still gonna end up there, but it's through the Heavenly Father, His way that He has decided and intended for you, man. You know, and seeing that the dream, didn't even, completely, end up or end, in a specific way, because that was the dream ended, when I was still, busy with my way, finding that back. So there's still a whole open end, a whole open future, to say it like that, with still some hope in there, right? Hope that I'll still make it to my belongings, you know. And those are the type of things that we should also be mindful of, man. We are not able to look into the future like that. The only thing that we're able to do, at the end of the day is to, trust in Abba Shem Yahushai, man. Put our faith and trust in Him, and, He shall direct our paths, man. Now, I mean, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, it says, "Trust in the Lord Yahweh with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths," man. So, if I now acknowledge the Heavenly Father, Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai, in this situation, the way that, it happened like this, He's still gonna direct my path, man. Am I going to get upset, or am I going to, put my faith and trust in Him? You know, that is the thing, man. Do not lean on to our own understanding, because it might be that, going that route is gonna get me messed up. But this route, can still, get me fixed up even better. Even better, you know. So yeah, I do not wanna, digress too much. But yeah, that basically was my like my dream testimony, and compare it, to my situation, that I'm busy with, or that is going on in my life, you know. But yeah, with that, I do hope and pray that this, video is edifying. And with that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles of Great Millstone, who teach and rule well, and shalom to the sincere Akim, spreading this truth and sincerity. Shalom.